1992 was an amazing year for CRPGs. All three of the biggest franchises received sequels. The Gold Box series was still going strong, and we saw the release of two genuinely revolutionary titles, Darklands and Ultima Underworld. And then there were the lesser-known titles, like The Magic Candles 3, Ishar and Amber Star. After such a jam-packed year, it's no wonder that SSI's Dark Sun Shattered Lands didn't have as big an impact as it deserved when it was released in the fall of 1993, which was just a few weeks before Myst. It's a real shame, though, as Dark Sun is a game that deserves more recognition. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the game is a bona fide classic. Not only could Dark Sun be seen as the progenitor of both Baldur's Gate and Fallout, it also serves as a blueprint for successful streamlining alongside titles such as Ultima 7 and Wizardry 8. Many older CRPGs have a rather high barrier of entry, so while it's regrettable, it's somewhat understandable that many younger gamers, and even self-proclaimed RPG fans and game journalists, have never tried or often even heard about such landmark titles as Pool of Radiance. Dark Sun, on the other hand, is a game that's very accessible and easy to get into. There's just no excuse for this game to be so forgotten. Like the title implies, the game takes place in the D&D setting of Dark Sun, a world so ravaged by defiling magic that nearly all life has been stripped away, leaving a desert waste. Another unique characteristic of this setting is the scarcity of metals, meaning that most weapons are made from bone, wood, and obsidian. Another unique feature of Dark Sun is the fact that all the characters have higher base stats than in other campaigns, as well as psionic powers, as life on Athas is so harsh that only the strongest survive. Like most old CRPGs, Dark Sun starts with party creation. Of course, you can start the game with a pre-made party, but now where's the fun in that? There are 4 character slots available and 8 classes and races to choose from. Amongst the humans, elves, and halflings, there are a few more novel races. There are the moles, which are a dwarf-human hybrid, half-giants, which are self-explanatory, and mantis-like insectoid creatures called the Thrykean, who cannot wear any armor. Half-giant gladiators and fighters are absurdly powerful, so I'd recommend putting at least one in your party. In fact, all the characters are really powerful in this game due to the ease of multiclassing. After you've decided on your character, you can try to re-roll your stats and try to choose which psionic and clerical sphere you're going to specialize in. Now, admittedly, throwing virtual dice for stats in a video game has become an outdated concept, and it is one of the areas where the game shows its age. Once you've assembled your party and start the game, you're immediately thrust in the middle of a gladiatorial arena where you must fight for your life. Once you're allowed to go rest in the slave pens, you must devise an escape plan. This first stage acts as a great introduction to the hostile world of Athas, as it portrays well the dog-eat-dog brutality of the setting, as well as the fact that you have multiple solutions to problems. Once you've managed to escape through the sewers out to the desert, the game world opens up and you can go anywhere you want. Your mission is to unite the nomadic tribes, formed by fellow escaped slaves, and destroy the army of an evil sorcerer called King the one whose name is beyond mortal pronunciation.
Great sun god, the great sun god's name could not be spoken, for it is pronounced
A large part of the game consists of doing small quests for various people you come across on your journey, and it definitely feels more like a late 90s isometric RPG than an early 90s dungeon crawler. Like I said earlier, the game could be seen as a progenitor of Baldur's Gate, and when you consider that it was made by SSI, you could say that it's the missing link between the Gold Box and Infinity Engine games. The game was made during a time period when mice had already become common peripherals. The UI is largely mouse-driven and very intuitive to use, which makes the game much more accessible than the DOSbox games. There are tooltips for everything, so you don't have to consult the manual every time you want to know what a spell does or how powerful an item is. Moving around on the screen is easy, and you can just drag and drop items into your inventory. You only need to use the C, G, O, and I keys for accessing your spell menu, guarding at the end of your turn, seeing a map of the area, and accessing your inventory. Everything else can be handled by your mouse. Oh, and you don't need to draw your own graph paper maps, thanks to the automatic map you have of every area. Though it removes the surprise from some encounters, it's a nice feature that makes traveling a whole lot quicker. While the game manages to streamline the control scheme of the DOSbox games quite well, in a way reminiscent of Ultima 7, some things are unfortunately lost in translation. For example, there are no banks nor trainers. You don't have to memorize spells before combat, and the camp command has been removed. Instead, you can sleep as many times as you want whenever you come across a campfire. And the game is overall more easy. But despite this casualization, the game still retains the core gameplay aspects of those games. The battle system is still turn-based and tactical, though movement isn't grid-based anymore. You can also land a cheap shot before engaging in combat, like in other, more recent D&D games. There are no random battles. Instead, you'll see monsters wandering around the map in real time, and once they get close enough, or you decide to attack one of them, the game becomes turn-based for the duration of the battle. Because you can move around freely during combat, and there's a wide variety of different spells available, positioning is very important. Though the game does suffer from the same problem as Troika's Temple of Elemental Evil, which is the fact that the encounter design doesn't match the depth of the battle system, meaning that you'll rarely have to use most of your abilities, whereas in some DOSbox titles, you might have far more limited options at lower levels, but you have to utilize all the tools at your disposal to overcome the tougher encounters. Even though it might sound like I'm criticizing the combat, it's still fun. It's rewarding to blast out multiple enemies with one fireball, and the noises the enemies make when you hit them are very satisfying. When it comes to sound and presentation, Dark Sun was one of the best CRPGs of its time. Even today, it's still one of the better-looking 2D RPGs made by a Western developer. The sound effects are nice, and the visual style is very striking due to the use of vibrant colors. The desert setting never becomes monotonous, thanks to the surprisingly varied locales. The color palette ranges from white and yellow sand flats and dunes to bright red desert soil. And there are loads of details in the background, from little things like lizards and hummingbirds to giant bones sticking out of the sand and intricate stone sculptures. Though they're not particularly special, the fairly large character sprites also serve their purpose. Most importantly, the art style stays consistent throughout the game. It never mixes and matches different clashing styles together like many other contemporary games did. Only the music is kind of lackluster, which is nothing out of the ordinary when it comes to late 80s and early 90s CRPGs, but it still fits the desert theme and is never ear-grating, so it's not bad by any measure. It's a shame that Dark Sun didn't end up becoming legendary like Pool of Radiance. It's not as groundbreaking by any means, but it's still an enjoyable game after all these years. I heard about it for the first time in 2014, and it became one of my favorite old-school RPGs almost instantly, which has made me wonder why the game isn't widely regarded as a classic. According to recent interviews, it cost a lot of time and money for SSI to develop Dark Sun, so it's really puzzling why the engine wasn't reused the way the Pool of Radiance engine, that spawned a whopping 12 sequels, was. Dark Sun did receive a sequel called Wake of the Ravager, as well as an MMO in '96 called Dark Sun Online: Crimson Sands. The consensus on Dark Sun 2 seems to be that it isn't as good as the first one. And it's really hard to find any kind of video footage or even screenshots of Dark Sun Online. It's just one of those early online games that was swallowed by time, which makes it all the more fascinating.